discrimination. So on the basis of all three of these, I claimed discrimination, and the Civil Rights Division of the Justice Department said, no, we're under orders from President Obama not to take any reverse discrimination cases. And that was confirmed for me by Mr. Walker on two separate telephone conversations, one in April and one in May.
That's in U.S. Department of Justice, Washington, D.C. You called them?
Right. 950 Pennsylvania Avenue, Northwest, Washington, D.C., United States Justice Department, Civil Rights Division, Mark Kappelhoff, Section Chief, and I have a letter from him, I'm looking at it right now, dated May 20, in fact. On May 29, however, they didn't throw it out completely. What they did was they referred me to the Special Litigation Office, which looks into civil rights matters and essentially does a class action lawsuit against local governments and state governments where there is a pattern of abuse of the process. I was not aware of this. I didn't really know the government did it. They referred me to their website, and they have sample cases up there. For example, this particular office sued the city of Pittsburgh, and I went there, I read the case, and I printed it. And if you can show, or somebody can show, or some organization can show that there's a pattern of abuse by local police and authorities, then the Justice Department will intervene outside of the court system and bring the guilty entities to the court. And the Justice Department has done this, so I proceeded to put together a package of 300 pages of documents and stories and information which I believe shows a pattern such as this in the city of New Haven, by the city of New Haven. I mailed this off on May 29 using the U.S. Post Office, and my paperwork never got there. It was never received by the Special Litigation Office. This has been confirmed for me through several phone calls. They didn't get it. I did not obtain a tracking number. I did not ask for a return receipt. I figured that sending this paperwork through a U.S. government entity to another U.S. government entity would be a piece of cake, and that it was a done deal. Apparently somebody intervened and my paperwork got deep-sixed. I don't know what else to think.
All right. The couch incident where you were arrested for having picked up a couch off of a sidewalk in New Haven, Connecticut, did that predate the dog incident in New Haven, Connecticut, Mr. William Doriss?
The couch incident predated the last arrest by, I believe, a week. I think it was on about July 18, 2001. I was arrested at gunpoint by Lieutenant John Smith. This, of course, I didn't know it at the time, but this would be classified as an excessive use of force situation where the police officer drew his weapon when there was when he was not in danger and there was no risk of flight on the part of the perpetrator, the so-called perpetrator, which in this case was me.
The couch, there was a couch on the side of the road going to be picked up by the trash collectors, and you're an antique dealer.
New Haven has a bulk pickup system. You can't bring your stuff to the dump. You call the city, they give you a date, you put your stuff out on the sidewalk, and then they come with a front-end loader, they pick it up and put it on a truck. So driving through the New Haven neighborhoods on any given day, you'll see piles of stuff waiting to be picked up. On this particular day, I had hair across my ass. I had two couches, two love seats on my truck that I didn't know what to do with, and I wanted to get rid of them. So I pulled over in my neighborhood and opened up the truck and offloaded the two couches onto an existing pile which was scheduled for pickup that day. Now, technically, this is against the law. However, in New Haven, and particularly in my neighborhood, this is routine. This is standard operating procedure. The neighbors next door, across the street, or what have you, they see there's going to be a bulk pickup. They have some something, some broken piece of furniture or something they want to get rid of, and they just add it to the pile, and usually nothing ever happens. However, on this particular day, unbeknownst to me, I didn't see a DPW guy sitting in a car down the road. He was sitting in the car observing or waiting for the trucks, and he saw me do it. He saw what I did. He called the cops, and the cops were there in less than 2 minutes.
Not unlike if you or I called for something.
However, nothing came of it. The state subsequently nollied it, which means they buried it. They weren't going to pursue. They weren't.
So you got arrested?
That was a cad for me at my trial. They said, well, we're going to drop these charges, but we're going to hit you with these, and we want you to plea bargain to this. And I said, no way, Jose.
All right. Do you think it was retaliation for you having complained about police officers and the court system in Connecticut?
At that point, I don't believe I had complained. I had already previously been arrested in the first dog case in the year 2000. That case was open and pending when I had the couch incident. And at that point, I don't believe I had complained. Basically, I had ignored it and put it on the back burner, which a lot of people do who have little experience with the police and criminal justice matters. A lot of times, if it's a small thing, they ignore it. You ignore these things at your peril. I had not complained about the police. The only thing I can say in this regard is that at this point, I was a known entity in the neighborhood. I was an adult white male in a mixed neighborhood that included African Americans and Hispanics and white people, or roughly in a one-third mix. I don't know if it was exactly that, but it was a mixed neighborhood. I was white. Particularly of note, I was riding around with my black girlfriend in a late model Ford box truck. I had my dog Zeus with me frequently. Riding in the truck, I walked my dog Zeus, the Rottweiler, in the neighborhood. I was very, very conspicuous to people in the neighborhood, and I was conspicuous particularly to the police. And I believe that in these types of neighborhoods, the cops look for reasons to arrest people. So I was a known entity, and they wanted to arrest me. And it's even worse than this because I now believe that there are police informants involved in both of my cases, insofar as in the first instance, the finger pointer was not the so-called victim or victim family. It was a third party, somebody I did not know, somebody who wasn't present, and brought the police officer to my apartment and pointed the finger at me and said it's him. Also, I lived in a multi-unit apartment house. Somebody moved in who I subsequently determined through a private investigator was in all probability another so-called confidential informant. Now, why is this important? Well, because when Detective Clarence Willoughby went to trial in Superior Court, New Haven, this year on completely unrelated charges to mine, Clarence Willoughby did go through a criminal trial. He was exonerated, but at trial it came out the New Haven police had 760 confidential informants. And this was reported in the New Haven Register, I believe, if not there, then the New Haven Independent. This is in the press. Very few people know that the New Haven police use confidential informants, and I think most people would be surprised at how many they use. And the issue in the Clarence Willoughby trial was records having to do with payments to confidential informants, and Mr. Willoughby, the detective, was being accused of embezzling or keeping improper records on payments to confidential informants. He pleaded not guilty, and he was found not guilty by a jury, and he got off. Of course, I have no way of knowing what the truth confidential informants, it should be understood, get payments either in cash or in kind from police for providing them with information. So it's to an informant's advantage to rat on people in the neighborhood, whether justifiably or not. They look for excuses or opportunities to point the finger at somebody and get that person arrested. It's basically a game. It's a very dangerous game. It's illegal, it's unlawful, it's unconstitutional, and the public basically has no idea how extensive this is. In fact, the New York Times recently carried an article about confidential informants in New York City. I believe that was posted this year. I don't have it in front of me. You can search it and find it. Just go to New York Times, type in confidential informants, and you can probably find that story. It's a big problem in the urban areas of America where police use underhanded tactics to falsely arrest people, get them to trial, and get them incarcerated. It's a business.
I believe that's true.
And the state of Connecticut are in the business of arresting people illegally and unlawfully and sending them to prison in order to keep the personnel at the state level, corrections people, prosecutors, judges, in order to keep all these people busily employed feeding at the public trough. The public has no idea how extensive and how sick this game is.
You faced 40 years in prison for your dog. Was it Zeus attacking a smaller dog?
Faced 69 years prison total.
That.
On November 4, 2002, when I walked into Superior Court, New Haven, to begin trial, my public defender came over and said, "You're facing 50 years." 50. And I said, 50 what? 50 days? She said, no, 50 years. And she said, they're offering you 3 years, they're offering you 5 years suspended after 3. I said, what? And she said, 5 years suspended after 3, 2 years probation. And I said, no way, Jose, let's go. And so we started the trial, and it wasn't until a year and a half later when I got all my paperwork. Actually, it was even longer than that. I got all my paperwork in about a year and a half. That's how long it takes for them to get you your paperwork. And then when I got a hold of the statutes and saw the maximum prison sentence on each charge, I added it all up, and it came to 69 years. I added it up several times over the course of a few months and got it wrong each and every time. It took me a long time for some reason, to get it all added up correctly. But I was actually facing 69 years. I went to trial. I went to the mat. I forced them to bring in the jury. We selected the jury, and we had the trial. And I used 2 public defenders. I beat 11 out of 13 charges, including 9 felony. 4 of the felonies, as I told you, were 10 years, and the remaining 5 felonies were 5 years each, 25, so I was facing 65 years in felonies and 4 years in misdemeanors, and I walked out with 2 years, with a 2-year prison sentence and 3 years probation. So after the trial, where I basically won, I walked out with almost exactly the same sentence as the plea bargain. The plea bargain was 5 years of state supervision, suspended after 3, and what I really got was 5 years of state supervision, suspended after 2 years, real prison.
So your dog bit a smaller dog. The Rottweiler, the bite ended up killing the Chihuahua, but kids were watching from across the street, and that was the state's argument that you should spend 69 years in prison.
Well, that's close. The kids were sitting on the stoop of a house about 30 feet away, at least 30 feet away. I'm going to say 30 feet. There was a big maple tree about 3 feet in diameter, which blocked their view. So they didn't actually witness, even though they were in the vicinity. They stayed on the stoop. My dog never went over to them. My dog never attacked them. It's simply a false accusation.
So you had an antiques business. You were a resident. So how much, it costs a lot of money for the state to bring all these investigations, but you also lost your business, and then you left the state to avoid being put in jail, correct?
That's correct. I am a political refugee in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Probation was riding me in New Haven. The probation officer kept ordering urine tests. We kept going head to head. We butted heads every single time I went to the office over a number of things. One of the things we butted heads over was exactly what I had been convicted of. Now, at the time I was visiting the probation office, I didn't have my records. As I said, I didn't get my records for a year and a half. So I'm going to probation, and I don't even have a copy of.
What was this about a year?
When I do get the records, I see that they have me down for one count under Connecticut General Statute 53-247B. And I looked at it and I said, "This is wrong. There's something wrong here." Well, what is 53-247B? Well, 53-247B is one of the felony counts under the cruelty to animals statute of which I was charged. And I was charged twice, I think twice, possibly three different counts of 53-247B, maybe one or two counts under 53C, which is training dogs to fight. And I beat all those felony charges by
you weren't
they had me down for one conviction. It was a clerical error.
You weren't training dogs to fight, and can we backtrack? And what's the?
However, 53B is a felony. Carries 5 years, and the probation officer kept telling me that I was convicted, and I trained my dog to fight, and I sent my dog, and I said, no, I beat those charges. You don't know what you're talking about. And she says, well, it says right here. It says right here. Well, she never showed me what she was looking at. It turns out that what she was looking at was a false report. I claim that the clerical error was a deliberate error by the prosecutor's office to get me in trouble with the probation. In other words, the state of Connecticut is in the business of falsifying the record in order to persecute individuals brought illegally and unlawfully into their stupid criminal justice system. It's a fraud. There's no other way to put it. It's a total fraud.
All right. If it was a crime, the punishment does not fit. What was wrong. It just seems like it all the expense and what is done. It seems stupid with other real crimes going on.
Oh, absolutely. You see, the city and the state. You have to understand, it's a protection racket. And there's a very good paper on the internet, which I can refer you to, not this minute, but it's a protection racket. The police are unable to prevent real crime. And in certain cities, like New Haven, where the police are incompetent and corrupt and stupid, some of them are actually illiterate, they cannot solve crime. The Yale girl, the Suzanne Jobin murder is a very good example. There are other murders in New Haven and other crimes in New Haven that the police simply cannot solve. They're unable to solve the crimes. They're unable to prevent the crimes, but they must show the public, the politicians and the public, that they're earning their pay. So they rack up arrests. They will arrest anybody for any reason as often as they can, and they will plant the evidence. They will perjure themselves under oath, and by this I mean police officers will perjure themselves. It happens all the time. They will get witnesses to perjure themselves in criminal trials. This is very commonplace. It may be worse in other jurisdictions. Baltimore, for example, has a very bad reputation. There are a number of other places around the country, and then it happens individually, sporadically in certain cases where they just want to bring somebody into trial. One of the most notorious cases in Connecticut is the Peter Riley case back in the 1970s, where Peter Riley, the high school teenager, was accused of murdering his mother, and they brought him to trial. He was convicted and then subsequently exonerated.
you could go over and over with a number of cases. Police officers in, what was it, Seymour? They were too busy sleeping with prostitutes and hanging out with drug dealers to do their job. So they had, they were making millions from taxpayers, and they can't even answer calls. So that's probably a national problem, not just Connecticut. With if police don't have civilian oversight, they misbehave.
Yeah, and speaking of civilian oversight, in the year after my trial, I filed 2 civilian complaints with the Civilian Review Board of the City of New Haven. I went to City Hall, I got the official forms, and I filed them. Well, now why didn't I file these previously, prior to the trial? Well, because the civil complaint board was not up and running until I believe June of '03. So in July of '03, shortly after the complaint board is up and running, I get the forms, I file the complaint, and I keep following up on it, checking up on it, and finally after a few months, I go down there and talk to one of the officers, a lady officer, I don't remember her name, and I said, what about my complaints? And she said, well, Internal Affairs determined that your complaint was a non-complaint. What the fuck is this? I mean, this is truly Orwellian. George Orwell is a genius. They didn't make us read that book in high school for nothing. Maybe a lot of you out there never heard of George Orwell.
Plenty of people that are.
Haven't, you should. And
if somebody's watching this video, they probably have heard of that.
I knew exactly what was going on. They don't want to be bothered. They just want to do what they want to do, and they want to be left alone.
You got me lost. After you made the complaint, did the police harass you more? Did you find that there was retaliation for having made a police misconduct complaint in Connecticut?
At that point I had already left New Haven when I filed that complaint. Actually, to tell you the truth, I would have been afraid to file a civilian review complaint while at the same time being a resident of the city. At the time in July of '03, when I filed that complaint, I had already left the city and I was living somewhere else in Connecticut. I was actually homeless at that point, to tell you the truth. I was really homeless.
So,
seriously homeless.
You're 65 years old, and because the rest of your life has been more or less you were producing tax revenue, you were working, you were paying your own living expenses, and so the state basically took all this taxpayer money in to do what they did to you when there's actual criminals out there.
Well, the various attorneys I've spoken to in trying to figure out what this costs the state, the figure that keeps popping up is $100,000. Well, I never provided, quite honestly, I never provided the state of Connecticut with $100,000. But be that as it may, I did provide them with tax revenue, perhaps a piddling amount over the years, maybe not as much as they were entitled to. But the fact of the matter is that the state of Connecticut put a legal and lawfully registered businessman in the state, somebody with no prior criminal record, put him through the ringer, basically ruined his life, put him out of his business, forced him to lose all of his possessions, and forced him into homelessness. And not only that, you're talking about a veteran. Right now in Connecticut, they're trying to do things for veterans. They're trying to give them tax exemptions. They're trying to help them with their health care, with their housing, with their this and that. You can hardly pick up the paper and see and not see proposals to help veterans. And here's a veteran that got persecuted by the very same governmental agency. It's really ridiculous.
I agree. Let's see. Have you said pretty much all you want to say, or?
I could talk all day, but let me just say this. I didn't leave the case. I didn't leave Connecticut voluntarily. I was forced out of Connecticut, and fortunately, I had family in Massachusetts. I have roots in both Massachusetts and Connecticut. I moved to Massachusetts I had that option. How many people don't have the option of leaving a city or a state where they're being persecuted? Many people don't have that option, so I'm really a lucky guy, and I'm grateful. I will say this, as far as I'm concerned, the city of New Haven, and perhaps the entire state of Connecticut is a lawless land. The criminal justice system is a serious joke, as I've said previously, and I put on the blogs almost on a daily basis. I blog under Doriss Day. You can go to New Haven Register right now and find a blog of mine on relevant topics.
You meant a comment.
It's a lawless land. It's out of control. I believe the federal government should intervene and take over the criminal justice system in Connecticut. I think I believe it's a shambles.
My thinking is, if we had a grand jury system where you had jurors that were elected or somehow picked, that they didn't have political connections, they didn't necessarily have to lot agree, they weren't somehow bought, and if they decided whether somebody should be investigated, prosecuted, and tried, if there was such an independent system in the courts rather than the judges and lawyers having their own mafia, do you think you would have even been?
Well, Connecticut, actually, the grand jury system, which is actually a group of civilians who come in to look over evidence and determine whether a person should be charged for capital offenses or other serious crimes. I don't remember the exact wording, but it's actually in the Constitution. And Connecticut and the original states originally had these. However, in the 1890s, I believe, there was a Supreme Court decision. The name of that decision is Hurtado. I believe it came from California. And I referenced this in my Supreme Court case. This permitted the states to roll back the burdensome use of grand juries. And Connecticut followed suit, and they basically gave it up. And papers have been written about this. I read these papers. There's been some legislation in Connecticut turning the grand jury function over to single judges. In my cases, in Connecticut, if it's a murder case, they will use a grand jury, but other cases where there's serious charges, they skip over that step altogether. I believe that if my charges, if my cases had appeared before a group of civilian grand jurors, which had been properly formed, that these charges would have been laughed out of the courthouse. There's no way that any serious individual would think that I had committed these crimes of which I'm accused in the state of Connecticut. So there's a serious problem here. I did raise the issue in my Supreme Court appeal. It's one of my talking points and one of my arguments. It's extremely difficult to follow this and understand the development and how the people have been deprived of the grand jury. Your contact, Nancy Lazarian, out there in Minnesota, this is one of her big issues. I'm sure you're aware of it. Other people have noticed this. For example, John Wolfgram, the activist attorney in California, he's another one. Elena Sassauer, you did a video of her. This is a serious problem, which the judicial branch is not addressing, and the politicians, the Congress is not addressing, the president is not addressing it. One senator who is concerned about these matters is Senator Jim Webb, the new senator from Virginia, and he has posted some of this stuff on his website. You can go to his website, and he has some really interesting stuff up there. This guy is to be commended, Senator Jim Webb, Virginia.
I think that legislators, officials, police officers, even judges, they all would have to worry if there was a grand jury system, because then they could be investigated.
Right.
They could be prosecuted and actually do time for what they do wrong.
Right. Well, the state of Connecticut is charging police officers now. There's a trial that was just concluded this week. I already mentioned Clarence Willoughby, and of course the feds took in Detective Billy White. That was a year ago, I believe, and his crew. But just this week, Officer Anthony Mayo, M-A-I-O, was found not guilty 4 charges in Superior Court, New Haven. This was at approximately 1 p.m. this past Tuesday. And you can go to the New Haven Register or the Independent and see a record of that with comments. On the New Haven Register, there are a couple of comments from me. Like I already said, Doriss Day, that's me. And those comments are still up there. I checked this morning. The stories can be found easily.
If you're...
It's not that officers are not being held accountable. It's just that the whole system stinks. I don't know how else to put it. I'm not saying that officers should not be brought on the carpet. They certainly should. In the Anthony Mayo case, and perhaps in the Clarence Willoughby case, it's not exactly clear, certainly not to me. I don't have enough information, but in the Anthony Mayo case, it's pretty clear, and the verdict came through with 4 not guilty verdicts. So the conclusion that I draw is that the system simply is not working, either for the police, and I'm not anti-police, I'm just anti-rogue and incompetent police. I'm for the police. And the system doesn't work for civilians, particularly young males who may be minorities and who may be living in some of the less desirable neighborhoods in our cities and states. And I think this is indisputable. It's a serious problem, and nobody wants to face it. Nobody wants to deal with it. Everybody seems to like things just the way they are, because you have so many people working for the state and in the various departments who are feeding at the public trough, and there is no accountability.
I've seen where police officers, white males, they take forever to bring them to trial. They purposely botch the trials so that the officer skates on appeal. There was an officer, Smith, I believe, in New Milford, stood in a black suspect's back, shot him, executed him, and then he was on appeal skated. So, the first trial was purposely botched. So it's okay for white police officers to execute blacks in Connecticut, maybe other states too. And there's another officer in Hartford. I don't know why his name is eluding me right now. He shot 2 blacks or 3 blacks in 2 incidences, and that's a year and a half, 2 years ago. There still hasn't been a trial. You don't hear much about it.
I think his name was Lawler.
Yeah, Robert Lawler. Yeah. I'm wondering myself.
Robert Floodquist from East Haven, who I believe it was 1997 from East Haven, and he chased Malik Jones, the 19-year-old black guy from New Haven, chased him into New Haven and shot him point blank. And this is what you call execution by cop. And there was a state investigation, and after a year and a half, it came down from the state that Officer Floodquist was justified because he felt his life was in danger. Of course, that's a pretext, and we know that's a load of crap, but he got away with it. And then he went back to work as a police officer. They gave him his gun back, and they promoted him to sergeant. He got a promotion for killing a 19-year-old black male in New Haven, point blank. They found no weapons and no drugs on Malik or in his car. The shooting was totally unjustified, and he got away with it. This happens not only in Connecticut, it happens in New York, it happens basically all over the country.
You were mentioned your friend Barry. I did a video of him too, but what was it? The 2 Stanford prosecutors, they resigned on Saturday or something? More information on that.
Let's see, what would that be? I think it was May. I believe it was late May.
This year.
I'm not sure the exact date. On the weekend, I heard from Henry Berry that Jonathan Benedict, a senior state's attorney for Connecticut in the jurisdiction of Bridgeport or Fairfield County, resigned. He resigned at 3 o'clock in the afternoon on a Saturday. And apparently what I understand from Barry, and I checked it myself, we couldn't find the story in any of the Connecticut presses. Henry got it off the AP wire. So the AP carried the story, and no I mean, who's Jonathan Benedict and why would anybody care? Well, this is a good question. And the reason why Jonathan Benedict is important is because he was the lead prosecutor in the Skakel case. Skakel was brought to trial actually at the same time that I was being tried in New Haven, or no, shortly before I was tried in New Haven. Skakel was tried in Norwalk, I believe, in May and June of '02, and Jonathan Benedict was the lead prosecutor and got a conviction in that case. Mickey Sherman, his real name is Michael Sherman, nicknamed Mickey, was the lead defense on that case.
Did Mickey Sherman also get in trouble for something?
Excuse me?
The lawyer?
The lawyer was Mickey Sherman from Stanford. I have a connection to Mickey Sherman. I went to high school with his older brother, Jerry. Jerry Sherman and I were on the same soccer team in high school.
Wasn't Mickey Sherman disbarred, or wasn't he in the paper for doing some attorney misconduct?
No, that wasn't Mickey Sherman. I think you're thinking about Henry Lee.
No.
I'm not saying that Mickey Sherman was. I think you're mixing up something. He may be accused of incompetence, but not malfeasance. Henry Lee got involved with the recent California murder case. Right now, the name is not coming to me. But Henry Lee, the infamous Dr. Henry Lee from Connecticut Forensics, went out supposedly helping a California case, and he was accused of taking some evidence from a crime scene and putting it in his pocket and simply walking off. He denies it, but there are a couple of witnesses that saw him. So Henry Lee is a questionable character in my book. There's a writer in Greenwich. And there's a writer in Connecticut, Leonard Levitt, who's written a book about Skakel and Henry Lee and so on and so forth. Right now, I can't tell you the names of those books, but I can tell you the author. Leonard Levitt is an apologist for both Jonathan Benedict and Henry Lee. Whereas I am not an apologist. I believe Michael Skakel was falsely convicted. I have no idea who killed Martha Moxley in 1975, but I do know that Michael Skakel was convicted of murder on nothing other than second and third hand hearsay evidence, some of it from an admitted heroin addict who died just before the trial. So he never personally testified. It was his deposition that was presented to the court. There was no physical evidence. There was no eyewitness evidence of Michael Skakel committing this murder. However, he was convicted and is now serving a life sentence in Connecticut. I have spoken to his new attorney, Hope Seeley, in Hartford, Connecticut. I tried to interest her in my cases. After several phone calls, Hope Seeley said she could not help me. And I said, why? And she said, because you have named people in your federal complaint before whom I may have to appear in the future. And I cannot now jeopardize those cases in the future by representing you now. In other words, it wasn't that I didn't have enough money. It was not that I didn't have a case. It was not that she was not interested. It was simply that she could not jeopardize crossing paths in the future with people, which would be Connecticut officials named in my federal lawsuit.
What you're saying in a roundabout way is that it's a rigged system, correct?
I certainly would say so. That's my opinion.
All right. I'm gonna render this, post it, and then I'll let you know when it's up on the internet. How's that sound?
Great.
All right. We'll talk soon.
Okay, Steve.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.